Hey guys, so yeah, I saw the JunkYard Dog episode, Dark Side of the Ring, but I also wanted to come on and talk about the Doink one since I didn't get the chance to do that yet. Um, and I will say this: the Doink one, Matt Bourne, if you will, yeah, it was dark. There is no doubt about that. It was very dark. They touched upon his history. Basically how he got into wrestling. Mainly how he started in the Portland area because the second generation star because his dad was, I think, tough Tony Bourne, and that how he migrated from the Portland area to places like Mid South, Georgia Championship Wrestling, you name it, and it was, like I said, very interesting. They even touched upon the fact that he was part of a heel faction called the Rat Pack, along with DiBiase and along with Ted DiBiase, I should say, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And there was an incident basically where a fan, you know, tried to get at Hacksaw. He tried to, he slugged him. He hit Hacksaw in the face or did something, and Hacksaw just hit him back. And as the guy fell forward, Matt Bourne ended up kicking the guy so hard in the head that in the reenactment, it showed graphically the guy's eyeball, and that's how they described it, coming out of his socket. Although there have been other interpretations, other versions from not just like Hacksaw and everything, but also from other people around that tell a different, take on what happened. So, basically, Hacksaw, kept his job because of that, but at Mid South, but Matt lost his because what happened was the person that you know got their head kicked in to the point that the eye socket came out. They ended up suing, Bill Watts. They ended up suing Matt Bourne. They ended up suing Mid South. And because they sued them, Matt Bourne ended up losing his job, and the Rat Pack Trio faction was no more. Um, After that, Matt ended up in WWF, and if you watch the first WrestleMania, and they did show highlights of this, Matt was, the in the first match of well, not the first match. I think it was the second match or something like that for WrestleMania 1. But he only stayed in WWF for a year because, of course, his drug problems. And this basically is what caused him to kind of get in trouble in some of the promotions he was in. It was his drug problems, and there were many incidences by being told by people that when it came to Matt, that got him in a lot of trouble. For example, B. Brian Blair met Matt at a bar that the wrestlers hung out in. I think it was in Florida when he was traveling there, working there. And Matt was so high and drunk or whatever that he got in B. Brian Blair's face, and it's like telling him basically accusing him, asking him, hey, why are you hanging out with my girlfriend and stuff? And Blair's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So the moment Blair turns his back, that's when Matt Bourne gets on him. He starts beating up on him. Blair fights back. Blair basically chews his mouth off, or chews his bottom lip off, bites his bottom lip off, if you will. And they're just beating and everything, and they're trying to get separated. Wrestlers and staff there, I think, are trying to separate them. And then later on, they're just, you're thinking everything is cooled down, right? But and Blair's having a few drinks. People are toasting him for beating the heck out of Matt. But then Matt just suddenly comes back and fights him again. And what's interesting is, long story short, Blair's like, what Matt did to me, you know, you know, shouldn't have happened, the way it did. It's like, you beat up on him, put him down, knock him out. But the way Blair was fighting him, he said was not human. And that's what the drugs did to someone like Matt Bourne. They turned him into a freaking superhuman. So anyway, long story short, Matt, like I said, ends up losing his job with WWF because of his drug problems and everything. Because he was caught, according to various reports, he was caught smoking smoking in a hotel room or hallway where they were staying, and he lost his job because of that. He lost his job because of that, and after that, of course, he did some independence, I believe, and then he ended up landing a job with WCW as Big Josh. And I do remember seeing Big Josh a couple of times in WCW, and this was at a time where I was getting into the wrestling. My exposure to wrestling back in the mid to late '80s was Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, flipping through the channels, ESPN, seeing AWA and stuff like that. But I didn't really start getting into the live action portion of it until, like I said, the late '80s and everything, late '80s, early '90s, and all that. I mean, I do remember watching it on occasions, but it's not as much because, again, I'm a kid. All I'm concerned about is watching cartoons. So, anyway, I get into watching it a little bit more, and I'm flipping through the channels, and I'm getting to not only still watch AWA, but I'm watching WWF, of course, more so than the AWA, and then I'm watching WCW, and I think this was around the time that Ted Turner bought them, but they were still associated with the NWA. But anyway, that's when I first saw Big Josh, and I'm like, okay, this guy looks big. He's big and intimidating, basically. And here's the thing, though, it didn't seem like Matt Bourne was that big of a guy, but he was. And the way they presented him, obviously as Big Josh, they tried to make him bigger than what he was, what he originally looked like. And that's the first time I saw him, on a national level. Because I didn't know he was part of WWF back in the '80s, so I didn't care. But back then I saw him. And then, shortly after that, of course, you're flipping through the channels and you're noticing some talent already gone. Like, you learn about talent in one promotion and then suddenly that talent's gone, but then you hear their name show up or be mentioned in another promotion. And you're like, okay, going over there, at least I can see him there. And Big Josh, he left WCW again due to, I think, his drug problems and all that. And he ended up in I think it was drug problems, or his contract about something like that. And it caught the attention of Vince, and Vince, basically, according to stories, was like, I know just the person who to play this clown character, this evil clown character, and it was Matt. Matt became, because he also was once known as Maniac Matt Bourne, he became Doink. And be honest with you, I am in agreement. This version of Doink was probably the best one because, he played basically what it was when you think about it was Maniac Matt Bourne in clown makeup is what it was, because he would do the laughing, the giggling, and then all of a sudden he would just get serious. Like kind of like Hugh Morris a little bit when he first started. Hugh Morris, Bill DeMont's character, but with face paint, and that's kind of what it was. And I remember seeing him, several times in the audience, and they were touching upon him like, who the heck is this guy? Why is he showing up? Who's this clown? And then he started to get more involved. It wasn't just, like with the fans, but now he's getting more involved with the wrestlers and everything. And to the point that he got into his first program with Kona Crush. Crush, Bryan Adams of Demolition fame, and then later on Chronic fame, if you will. But yeah, he got into his first major program with him. And they did mention that as time was going on, they were discussing behind the scenes, the idea of building him into a babyface. But what was interesting, though, was Matt, I think they touched upon it, was not too thrilled with the idea of being turned babyface or the direction they were going with the Doink character, because they touch upon the match at WrestleMania 9 and the mirror Doink situation, and of course later finding out that was Steve Kern, known as Skinner in WWF, and I think part of one half of the Fabulous Ones as well, with Stan Lane. They touch upon the fact that Kern was the other Doink, and that Matt wasn't too thrilled about that. It's like they did the segment and everything, but Matt wasn't really too thrilled with the idea that this was happening. He felt it was Vince's way, and this is what his daughter believed, and this is what I think one of his ex-wives said, that it was Vince's way to, really downplay him, like kind of bring him down, sabotage him. And in a way, he was kind of right. He was kind of right and everything. But what really happened was his drug problems and everything, smoking, and all that, started to, really get to him again, to the point that he was no-showing events. He was missing some events. And once again, he was caught smoking. I don't know if it was in a hallway or it was just in his room, but he was caught smoking. He was, of course, tested, and I think they found a lot in him, and he was let go. And what made things interesting, they did touch upon it, was he was in a situation to where, you, like, let's say the whole, like, for example, let's talk about the whole fake Diesel Razor Ramon deal, right? WWF back in '96 did that because of the fact that when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash went to WCW, everybody, including yours truly, thought that it was Razor Ramon and Diesel showing up to invade. Because you'd just seen them on WWF television, and now you're seeing them down here, and you're like, what's going on, right? In the mannerisms, the way they were acting, and stuff like that, it gave that illusion. So what did WWF do? They sent a cease and desist, and then to try to show that, hey, we still own the copyrights to these characters, and we can use them any way we want. They have, they have Glenn Jacobs, who'd go on to be Kane, and they had the guy that would be known as Big Titan in Japan show up as the new Razor and the new Diesel to send the message of, hey, we can put anybody that's 7 feet tall or 6'6", in these outfits, and give them these names and have them use these mannerisms, identical to the originals. And we'll just say, this is Diesel, this is Razor Ramon, and everything. Even if we do, and they did do it, play off the fact that, hey, these are not the real deal. This is not Scott Hall. This is not Kevin Nash. That they would still acknowledge them as Diesel and Razor because they own the copyright. And the same with Doink. The only difference is, whoever you had don the face paint in the wig, the mask and wig, if you will, in the outfit, basically, there was no way people could detect it was somebody different. I mean, yes, the smart fans, and yes, there were smart fans back then, they could detect it. They could see a few differences, but most of the time it was like, no big deal. No big deal. It's like, it's just Doink. And what happened is Matt, again, like I said, his drug problems and all that caused him to the point that he decides he's going to go to ECW. He is. He's going to go to ECW. But in between, I think what they said is his family said he ended up finding them where they were in Oregon or in Texas, one of the places. And he ended up getting a job as an accountant, but it still wasn't enough. And especially with his drug problems and all that. So he finally got an opportunity to redeem himself or at least try to rebuild himself in ECW with the Bourne Again character. And the way it was played off is Matt would basically be Maniac Matt Bourne, but kind of split personality. And what he would do to his opponents, and they had footage of him doing this to Too Cold Scorpio. You see, he would put the headpiece with the hair over them, and he would say something like, how's it feel to live how's it feel to experience my hell or live out my hell and all that. Basically taking a shot at the fact that the Doink thing was a living nightmare for him. But the thing is, and they showed him doing a documentary on this. I guess he was doing one for an independent show or something he was doing. And he was donning the face paint, and he still became Doink. Even after WWF, Vince McMahon, basically sent him a cease and desist and to not do it anymore. But he kept doing it. It was like, it was like a case of, okay, he got residuals, royalties, and everything because of action figures, game appearances, and all that. But he still said, F him. He still said F him, if you will. And you know, excuse my language, God, fuck him, if you will. That's basically what he said. And he kept doing it. And I guess it got to a point that, in my opinion, Vince is like, screw it. It's not worth fighting over anymore. Let's just let him do it. Let's just let him do it. Because I think they also realized it got them more exposure with the word getting out that this Doink was WWF, a WWF Doink. And that, hey, one night he could show up here, on an independent show in Northeast Canada, and then magically show up in, Albuquerque, New Mexico for a Monday Night Raw appearance, and that was it. So it kind of created that illusion that they profited off of. But yeah, he did the Born Again character for a while. They didn't touch upon the fact that he aligned himself with Shane Douglas for a bit, but he did do the Born Again character in ECW. But once again, his drug problems got the best of him, surprisingly, of all places, ECW. And he was just out of a job. And again, he was doing independence. He, obviously got some other jobs and everything, but his drug problems were just really catching up to him and all that, to the point that he did a lot of things outside of the ring, with his to his family at times, to where it's like his wives were like, we can't deal with this. We can't live with this. And one of the wives he was with, he had a child. She had a child with him. And he was just so messed up one time. He was throwing cigarette butts at him with, littered cigarette butts at her and the child. He was beating up on her with the child. Almost caused the child to go flying, I think they said. And she was just like, one day, I'm done. I am done with this and everything. And then the other wife, who he had some kids with, felt the same way. Because, he was trying to get clean, but he just couldn't. And she just took both kids and told him, I'm leaving. I can't deal with this anymore. And what's crazy is he didn't stop her. He said, I understand. Because this was also the wife, I think, that he ended up, getting angry with her, accusing her of something, and he just beat the heck out of her to the point that she ended up in the hospital without her eyesight, for 2 weeks. I mean, she could still see, but her eyes were so swollen shut that she couldn't open them up for 2 weeks. And when he came into the hospital, he couldn't remember, how exactly she got there, but, I guess it dawned on him that he probably was the one that did this because of his drunken outrage. And he apologized and everything and all that. And then later on, he met another girlfriend, who was a nurse, a manager, if you will, in CWA, the early USWA, as nurse something. And she said they were just both crazy for each other, both compatible because they were both crazy for each other and all that. And she moved in with him. And here's where things get interesting, because it was his time with her that really, everything, life-wise came crashing down. Because, of course, all the drugs caught up with him. He was trying to help her take care of her mom, and her mom had medicine, drugs to help her feel better, because she was older. And all of a sudden, he starts having this attack. Basically they get to the moment to where he's having, he's going to die. Gets to the day he's going to die and everything. And he's having this moment to where it's like, it feels like he's having a heart attack. He gets on his knees. He's asking her, I think her name was Connie, to marry her. And she's like, I don't know what they're doing here. This is freaking me out. And so anyway, she just helps him to the chair, lets him lay there on the chair, or sit on the chair, relax, and everything. And that was it. Basically, what happened next is, it wasn't the chair. It wasn't the chair just yet. It was on the bed, and she said she heard some gurgling sound. And she's like, what? And she's thinking that she's snoring and all that, but then she turns, she sees his foam coming out of his mouth, coming out of his nose. And she's going to, and this is what gets people suspicious of whether or not she had something to do with his death. Because the daughter believes that this last lady, this Connie lady, is responsible for her dad's death. And Connie's like, I don't know why she feels that way. That surprises me. And everything. I don't know why she believes that. And yet you have all this toxicology autopsy reports that have been filed by the police that kind of, I guess you could say, differ. They differ from what she's telling people, from what she's telling the people at Dark Side of the Ring, from her stories. They differ from the accounts, like the timing of when she called, 911, when she went to bed. Basically, this is something very suspicious. So this is why the daughter believes she had something to do with it. Now, Solomonster, when he talked about it in his review, he didn't point her out as being one of the enablers. He pointed, I think, his second wife out as an enabler that kind of caused him to lose his job, I think, with WWF when he was Doink The Clown. Anyway, long story short, Tegan, Matt Bourne's daughter, believes that this Connie lady had something to do with it, and even Solomonster feels like she had something to do with it as well. Now they did interview people. They interviewed Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who wasn't and took part in this because he knew Matt, part of the Rat Pack and all that. They interviewed Jim Cornette. And of course, they interviewed the wives and the daughter. And I think, and they interviewed B-By and Blair. And I think they interviewed Jake, I believe. I'm not really sure. Jake the Snake's been very prominent in a lot of these, even if he didn't need to be. But, they interviewed a lot of people. And Hacksaw basically brings up a situation to where he was doing an independent show in the early 2010s. I think it was 2010, 2011. And Matt is still doing the Doink character somewhat, but he's dyed his hair green. He's got like a little bit of the clown eye makeup on. And he just starts talking about the history him and Duggan have, and Duggan's just like, he doesn't know what's going on, because even in the back, he's like, Matt's trying to suggest certain things, and Duggan's like, dude, we're going to be in front of 100 plus people, 200 plus people. We don't need to do that. We'll just go out, do what we do. I'll do the USA stick and all that. But then Matt came out and basically, again, started to ramble off on the history. And then when they locked up, Matt kind of backed him into the corner and started shooting on him. And he shot on him by giving him a legit shot to the nuts. And when they tied up again, it was kind of more of a shoot. And then they just went outside. Duggan grabbed his 2x4. Matt grabbed a chair. And he's just telling the ref, hey, tell him if he wants to finish this like men, we'll finish it in the back. So Duggan goes to the back. Waiting for Matt. But Matt, he doesn't show because apparently what he did, and they didn't talk about this detail, Solomonster brought this up, is that he basically already had his car loaded up, his truck, car, whatever it was, loaded up, that'd be Matt Bourne, and Matt took off. He took off, for who knows where, and that was it. And this took place at a Pro Wrestling Syndicate show. So it was like, okay, so obviously it was like, okay, if you're Hacksaw and you're the promoter that booked this match, you're like, yeah, something is not right here. Something is definitely off. Now, what's interesting is they didn't bring up this detail, but Solomonster brought it up, that Matt talked to his daughters on Father's Day, mentioned it was going to be Father's Day and everything, that he basically brought them up, said he loved them, and that he's going to be with his father soon, or he's going to see his father soon. And Matt's father had passed years ago, and that was Tough Tony Bourne. He had passed years ago, and that was obviously a sign that something was not right mentally. And then again, of course, go back to when he passed away and everything. And again, there's that suspicion of he either took the pills that was set out for his current girlfriend's mom at the time, and everything, that overdid, that caused him to pass, or it was the girlfriend, which again, the Tegan daughter believes. She truly believes. The end result, obviously, from the toxicology and the autopsy was it was an enlarged heart, which a lot of wrestlers do get, but it was 6 times its regular size, which would be due to drugs. So that didn't help and everything, so that didn't help him in the long run. And yeah, he ended up passing, and that was it. Now that was it. Now again, this was a very dark episode. There's no doubt about it. Very dark. But yeah, it definitely portrayed Matt as someone that was not just heavy into drugs, but also someone that let drugs take him over physically and mentally, to the point that he had hallucinations and all that. He's beating on his wife along with a child. It's like he was just. I'll put it this way: this did not, no matter how much, his daughter Tegan wants to defend him, and look, she even admits he screwed up a lot. But as much as she wants to defend him, or even believe he was murdered, this did not paint Matt Bourne, the original Doink, in a good light. It didn't. It didn't. So yeah, like I said, very dark episode. And then what followed, of course, was yesterday's episode on JunkYard Dog. And this is one of the characters I knew of growing up as a kid, because back in the mid-'80s, of course, you had Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. And he was one of the characters that was on there, one of the prominent characters. And his rubber LJN figure, the bendable, was one of them that I had. I had him in the Iron Sheik. So I had that one. I had that figure. And what they touched upon was the fact that Bill Watts, who was running Mid-South at the time, took a chance on him. He took a chance on him, and basically they became good friends. And that every place they went in Mid-South, from Louisiana to Arkansas, Tennessee, they sold out the places. They sold out the Superdome. Whatever venue they can get, they sold it out. They sold it out, and it was, and you could see that. You can see in any archival footage they would show, they did exactly that. They sold those places out, and everybody was behind JYD. Everybody. They talked about, the fact that he had a feud with Ted DiBiase and everything. They touched upon, like I said, they touched upon the fact he had a feud with Ted DiBiase. How Ted, him and Ted were friends behind the scenes, good friends. But what is the best way in Mid-South, where basically you have to make the wrestling and the storylines blur reality, make them feel legit and real. Like, how do you do that? And Bill Watts suggested Ted DiBiase, who had JunkYard Dog as his best man at his wedding. He suggested, why doesn't Ted turn on JYD? And what happened was, I think JYD was North American champion at that time, or they were fighting for the vacated title, and they were booked as a team. They were booked as a tag team together. So the idea was, why not have Ted in this match for the title, basically turn his back on JYD by hitting him when the ref's back is turned, or he is knocked down by accident. He uses a foreign object or something like that to whack JYD in the face, to knock him out, and go from there. And basically a rivalry is made. So they talked about that a little bit, touched upon that. They touched upon the fact that he had a feud, kind of a brief feud, with Jim Cornette and his representatives. They touched upon the Freebird situation with the hair cream, and where he got blinded and everything. And since they already mentioned a lot of it in the Tales from the Territories deal, basically JYD played this role of being blinded and everything, and probably not being able to see again, to the hilt, if you will. Even to the point that in the Tales from the Territory deal, they showed him trying to, touch where his baby was, and his wife had to put his hand on her belly and everything, saying it's right here. And he just, kept in character with this for a while until one night, to where Jim Cornette said that he was one of the only people JYD said this to. During one night at a show in Louisiana, JYD's at ringside, and the Freebirds are in the ring in a match, and they notice JYD. They're shouting at him, and JYD, he has to keep up the act of, okay, I can't let them know I'm not blinded. I gotta act like I'm blinded and all that. And this fan right behind him says, "Don't worry, JYD, I got him for you," and he's pointing a gun right at the ring, right at the Freebirds, getting ready to shoot them. And what Jim Cornette said basically was JYD was conflicted, because he's like, "Oh man, what do I do? I can't break kayfabe and even show that I could still see. What do I do?" And basically what happened is that JYD has to thank his lucky stars, because the police were able to notice this guy and take him down and all that, so that JYD wouldn't have to break kayfabe. Now, they didn't touch upon this in the episode, because again, they touched upon this in Tales from the Territories. But this led, of course, to the dog collar match between him and Michael P.S.A.'s. And in the match, JunkYard Dog lifts the eye patch up and shows that, hey, or lifts up both eye patches or something like that, and shows that, hey, I see you, and goes from there. Now, they did touch upon the fact that it was during this time JYD's drug problems got the best of him, and all that, and that the road schedule was really starting to change, to the point that, it went from him being able to see his family as much as he could to basically seeing them less, and all that. So yeah, basically that's what resulted in him starting to get on drugs, from like speed to crack to cocaine to whatever dope, if you will, whatever he could get his hands on that he could smoke or snort or whatever. He just started to get into it. Then they basically touched upon the fact that JYD, even though he's getting paid a lot, for his time in Mid-South, and he's getting paid a lot, pretty decent, and Bill Watts was taking care of him, getting him a car and all that. It still wasn't enough. And according to those they talked to, from Coco B. Rare to Tony Atlas to Teddy Long to Jim Cornette, to his nephew and everything, they even had archival footage and audio of Ernie Ladd and Bill Watts. And basically what was explained is, to kind of add financially to the support for him and the guys, JYD basically got women to pay him to get get laid. They basically paid him to get laid. And if there was any of the wrestlers that needed, I guess, some relief, the same thing would happen. Tony Atlas said it happened to him and others. It's like, oh, get free drugs and get laid for free, But they did point out the fact that one time they were doing this, and there was another knock at the door, thinking, oh, it's going to be some of the other wrestlers, maybe another girl. It turned out to be one of the women that was already there. It turned out to be one of the women that were already there's husband. And what did JYD do? JYD basically took the guy and tossed him out, and the wife stayed there. The wife stayed there and all that. But yeah, the guy wanted to fight JYD, and JYD's like, ain't gonna happen, and throws him out. But yeah, it was a little after that they talked about JYD getting the attention of Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon offering him money, basically 10 times more than what he was making, to come to WWF, and that's what happened around 1984. And they mentioned that Bill Watts was saddened about it, felt like his heart got broken, got stabbed in the back, if you will, because he had done so much for JYD, and then JYD just gets this big money offer to go to the World Wrestling Federation in New York. And what happened is that they showed footage from Mid-South where Bill Watts, I think it was two separate, I don't know if it was the same episode or two separate episodes of Mid-South Wrestling, but they have Bill Watts coming on there and talking about JYD just getting up and leaving and everything. It was basically kind of a shoot, if you will. And yeah, you could definitely tell he was disappointed. He's very disappointed. But yeah, JYD went to WWF. That's how I got to become a fan of his, again, because of the whole Rock and Wrestling deal and Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling. And they did touch upon the fact that, unlike his father before him, Vince did not make the minority, the other races and ethics, top priority. Like, he'll give them a bit of like a push, a bit of a upper tier billing, if you will, by associating them with the likes of Hogan or whoever, but they were not going to be like at that level and everything that Hogan was. Like, you can associate with him and all that, but you're not going to be like at that level. And JYD, he got a lot of fame out of it. He got famous for singing "Grab Them Cakes," which his nephew said he couldn't sing a lick of, and all that. But yeah, he got all the fame. He got a lot of fame there. There's no doubt. Got a lot of residuals and everything. But over time, it just came crashing down. It just came crashing down to the point that I don't know if he was just let go, because his contract expired, or was his drugs that caught up to him. No, actually, what it was is that he no-showed. Is what it was. He no-showed a couple of events. I think it was also due to his drugs. And he was let go because of that. Now, there was an incident where Tony Atlas went to go get him, because Tony Atlas was still working for WWF and everything. And Tony Atlas was told by Vince to go get him to be on the Tuesday Night Titans show, which was also going to be taped alongside some wrestling matches. And Atlas goes to get him. Everything is going according to plan. But then JunkYard Dog says, "Hey, let's go over to this one area, find some dope. See if I can get somebody to sell me some dope." The limo driver don't know what's going on. He's just following instructions. And they show up in this one area. He gets his dope, his crack or whatever. And then he asks the limo driver, according to Tony Atlas, "Can I smoke?" And the limo driver, again, don't know what's going on. He's like, "Okay, go ahead." And, that's... and then because he's thinking, he's only going to smoke regularly, right? And then he sees what he's smoking. He's like, "Okay, I don't know what's going on here. I'm just going to leave it be." And he just drives him to the studio, or drives him to the building, but they're too late. Atlas misses his match. JunkYard Dog misses, I think, his spot on Tuesday Night Titans, and Atlas loses his job with WWF at the time. And Atlas, they even touched upon this with Atlas. They said, he was close to thinking suicidal thoughts until the Samba Simba gimmick came up, so that kind of helped save and rejuvenate his career. But anyway, like I said, they let JYD go because he had no-showed some events and everything, and he ended up going back on the independents where he didn't pay as much, but I think just enough for him to get around, get by, and everything. And then he gets a call from WCW, and again, this is how, and again, this is one of those incidences to where I'm flipping through the channels, and I see JYD. It's like the instant you see somebody like a JYD show up in WCW, it's like, okay, at least we now know where he's at. What really surprised me, though, is I didn't even know Jim Neidhart was with WCW back in the early 90s, back in the, 93, 92? I would guess it was 93 because that was around the same year they were trying to put him in a tag team earlier that year with, with Owen, and he got let go, I'm assuming because of his drug problems. And, here he is in WCW. It's like, what? Wait a minute. Jim was in WCW. And they do have footage of him in WCW because he was trying to play up the whole, give the fans or give somebody something to wear. And it would always be like a little strap of chin of hair chin representing that made the fan look like him or feel like him or something. I don't know. But yeah, he went to WCW, and of course one of his first major feuds there was with Ric Flair. I do remember he wrestled him for the NWA WCW Championship. So he had time. He was there for a couple of years, but then unfortunately he was let go again due to drug problems and all that, and he just went back to independence, and he did it. Times were just getting hard for him, to the point that he ended up working part-time at a Walmart. Now, for someone like me, working part-time or full-time at a Walmart, that's, nowadays, that's good money, depending on what position you're in or how long you've been there. Back then, though, I don't know. I don't know how much even part-time he was being paid for or anything. I think they said he was working as security or some kind of position at Walmart, like a cashier. I don't know if it was floor associate or something, night shift. But yeah, he was working there for a while. Of course, what I'm surprised they didn't touch upon was the fact that he did an appearance at ECW's WrestlePalooza that year, or a couple years later in '98, because they were in the Mid-South area, Georgia, and all that. But they did touch upon the fact that he did go and drive almost non-stop from his home, I think he said it was in Louisiana, to North Carolina for his daughter Latoya's graduation, because he said he was not going to miss it. And, his nephew said, man, just think about how much how much that gets you over, knowing that your father who's coming to your graduation is JunkYard Dog. So he goes to the graduation. He tries to get to the graduation. He misses it, but he gets there in time for the celebration. So at least he's there to be with her and all that. To celebrate her graduation and all that. But then, they showed a picture of him holding his nephew's son, and that was like the last picture before he passed. And what happened is JYD, after the party's over, decides he's going to drive back and everything. And he goes to the gas station. His nephew meets him there because I guess he needs, some help getting gas or something like that, or something's going on. He just meets him there, and his nephew notices on the door, as JYD's getting in, he notices this stuff on the door. And he's like, dude, what is this? And JYD's like, oh, that's puke. And he's like, and his nephew's like, yeah, no kidding. And again, his nephew's kind of like, oh, you're going to be okay? Are you fine? And JYD, aren't you going to get some rest? Because he's wondering, aren't you going to stop somewhere and get some rest? And JYD's like, no, I'll be fine. I'm going to go nonstop. And it's basically about an 8-9 hour drive, and you're thinking nonstop. Even when you, I'll say this. From recent experience, even a 2-hour drive, if you will, even a 2-hour drive or hour and a half drive requires you to stop. Even during the day. So, again, JYD said, though, basically like, I'll be fine, I won't stop. And he just drives off, and that's the last his nephew sees of him. And the next morning, his nephew's at work. He gets the call from his mom stating that JYD had died. He was killed in a car wreck and everything. And that the autopsy, the toxicology and autopsy, basically revealed it to be head trauma. And from what they described, there was no skids on the road. And that basically, because apparently what happened, according to the reenactment dramatization, he fell asleep at the wheel. And Jim Cornette even said, look, drugs can, keep you going for quite some time and everything, keep you awake for days, if you will. But sooner or later, that's all going to catch up, and your body's going to just want to shut down and say, I'm done for now, you need rest. And basically that's what happened. JYD was behind the wheel, according to the reenactment, and his body just said, enough, shut down. And apparently he didn't skid off the road, he just, he was driving, I guess his car he just went, he didn't skid or anything, because there was no skid marks going to his head, but he just kind of like went off the road and he flipped. He flipped his car, and it was, again, head trauma that caused him to die. but it was also, of course, due to the drugs that were in his system and everything. So yeah, that's what happened, and yeah, it was hard to hear when I first heard about it. I was like, what? Because again, I grew up on JYD. I grew up on the JunkYard Dog. So I was like, what? You know, um, but yeah, they kind of talked about that. The nephew went and visited his grave, where it's a flat headstone. It's not like tilting up or anything. It's just a flat headstone, and what it has for the picture is it's got this like little thing that you just twist, and the picture's underneath, but then you can twist back and keep the picture protected from the sun. And then they showed that right below him is his daughter Latoya, who had passed away. I think about a year or two after she was there for his induction into the Hall of Fame, and it was due to some kind of issue with her heart and everything that she passed away from. But yeah, it was just. But yeah, it was a. I'll say this. It was very. It was dark because apparently the whole situation with JYD was, the reason for his drug use, it was mental problems. His mental health was kind of getting the best of him because he was a big star in Mid-South and everything, but he wasn't making that much money as much as he would hope, even though he's being taken care of very well, which is why he would do the whole get paid by girls to, get laid and all that, and also why he took the money in, WWF, even though he wasn't going to be on that same level. But yeah, it's just a sad ending to a great career and everything. And again, the people they talked to in this episode were Jim Cornette, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Jake the Snake Roberts, Coco Beware, Teddy Long, Tony Atlas, and then on Carvo-wise they had Bill Watts in a video shoot, and audio-wise they had Big Cat Ernie Ladd. So, and they did have footage of Big Cat inducting JYD into the Hall of Fame. So they had that and everything. They talked about the fact that I don't know who it was, but somebody pointed out JYD to Ernie Ladd, and Ernie Ladd pointed this out to Bill Watts, and Bill Watts was the kind of person that looked at JYD, realized, okay, he's not, an actual catch cans wrestler, but we can work around that, and seeing that JYD was, a football player, or had background in football, he basically used his abilities, or he worked around, Bill Watts basically worked around that, like, let's use his football background to really, make him into a big deal, and it worked. Because, JYD still had to learn a few wrestling moves, like clotheslines and all that. But outside of that, it was more like, okay, let's work around what his strength is. What will make him, pop in front of people, if you will. And that's what and to me, that's basically, that's basically what Bill Watts did. Bill Watts basically worked around that, and it worked. And apparently Vince McMahon, according to others, didn't know how to utilize that. And you can kind of see that wasn't that was kind of the case. Like at first, Vince obviously was going to try to do that, but then he just, went in a different direction, and it just never worked out. But yeah, overall, the episode was, like I said, it was dark. It wasn't too dark, because, we already kind of knew how he passed and everything, but, the dark part basically again was the drug issue and everything, and how that kind of took a hold of his mental being, his mental health and all that. And it just really got to him to the point that again, he wasn't making as much money in Mid-South, to the point that he had to do these situations with girls wanting to pay him to get laid and all that. To the point that some of the girls would even pay hundreds of dollars to make that to do that. So that weighed on him, and then getting the offer to go work for Vince for more money than what he was working in Mid-South, and kind of turning his back on Mid-South and everything. It's like that didn't help. and then getting a second chance in WCW, where maybe Bill Watts was working at the time, and Bill Watts wanted to recapture that magic he had caught before with an African American athlete being the top tier guy there. You know, it did. It was just everything just really got to him, and on top of that, the drugs didn't really help out, and some said that he even got so bad with like the crack and some of the strong stuff that he would take it almost every day. Like no matter where he went, he would take it. He would take it every day, or no matter where he would go. People would know, okay, if he's exiting the building, he's not gonna, just go straight to his car and go back to his hotel. He's just gonna exit the building and go maybe to the stair, or go and sit on the stairs, or go to the side of the building and do his crack, and all that, or do whatever he was doing. So yeah, it was kind of hard to hear about that, but they did end on the fact that outside of that, they like to think more about the happy times, about the happy about the happy times they have with JYD and everything. I mean, when they were asked about when he passed, the wrestlers and everything, Jake the Snake basically said he was happy for him, because at that time when he passed, Jake the Snake, and this is infamous, everybody knows, was in a bad place himself. He was still in what he called the trenches and everything. So he was happy that JYD wouldn't have to suffer with that anymore. He was out of that predicament, even if it was too soon for that to happen. And Ted DiBiase mentioned, and he repeated this again because JYD brought it up to him on a phone call. He said, "When you're preaching to those kids, preach to them, tell them not to do this, not to make the mistakes I've made." And Ted said at the end, when he repeated that when he heard that come out of JYD's mouth, that he knew that was the JYD that he had become friends with, that was the real JYD, and that he was back. That was the real Junkyard Dog, and he was back. So yeah, again, good episode. Just hard to hear about. What happens behind the scenes with people like JYD and everything. Like I said, I grew up on JYD as a fan, had his LJN rubber action figure. Still wish I had it to this day, but what are you gonna do? But yeah, it's just hard to hear about that and everything. But I'm just glad people still get to look past those negatives and look at the positives and all that, and just look at the impact that he had. Not just from a regional level, but from a national level as well. Being able to transcend, if you will, all ethics, because you didn't just have black people coming in to the arenas or the places like the Superdome and wanting to see him and all that. You had whites, you had Mexicans, you had people of all colors and races supporting and getting behind JYD, which was really cool. And the other thing that they talked about was he also gave back to the community. Like, he would go to the schools, he would make time, just overall a good person, basically. But again, the drugs, and being on the road so much and everything just got to him, and it was like, yeah, it's just hard to hear about that stuff. But like they said at the end, you when it comes to someone like JYD, you want to think more about the happy times and not the hard times, or not the bad times. And I do agree with that. So overall, good episode. And they're taking a break next week because, of course, that's the 4th of July. But they will be back on July 11th. And that's going to be the episode where they talk about Adrian Adonis. And that's going to be a dark episode in itself. I can tell you that right now, just from the previews they were showing. But guys, give me your thoughts overall. What did you think of the Doink episode the week before? What did you think of the JYD episode that aired yesterday? Give me your thoughts overall. Super Chat. That's our open in the live chat of this premiere. If you want to help donate there, also comment below in the comment section. Also check out the Teespring store by clicking the shop icon on the title display when it pops up, or the little shopping bag icon, if you will. Also, there's the super thanks. If you want to hit that up, that'd be greatly appreciated. You will get an audio version of this at BW Rose's Discussions Podcast at all your favorite podcast affiliates and outlets, but mostly try it at Spotify. That will help me tremendously with the ambassador ads, and from a financial standpoint, to help me unlock those. Also, guys, check me out at patreon.com. So that's BW Roses. Love to get your support there and everything with the $1, $3, $5 tier. And middle guys, that's all I can say. Again, comment below. Comment in the live chat with the super chats are open and available. And until then, talk to y'all later.